Welcome to the SBCA podcast, Component Connection, where we explore the people, ideas, trends, and innovations shaping the structural framing industry. Regardless of how you touch this industry, we're glad you're here. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, this is Abby Langenberg, Director of Business Development for the Structural Building Components Association, and I will be your host for this episode of Component Connection. As always, I'm joined by Jess Lohse, our Executive Director here at SBCA. And after our last episode that did so well, I think you've earned a promotion to co-host for this episode. So today we're talking about how component manufacturers can build resiliency and stay proactive in an ever-changing housing market, from developing new business to diversifying offerings and connecting with peers. We will explore what manufacturers can do to stay competitive and continue growing even when the market slows down. Welcome, Jess, and congratulations on being co-host.
Thank you. I appreciate the upgrade or the promotion there. I guess I got to bring it every single time, right?
Exactly. As we start off, I think the first thing that comes to mind when a lot of people are looking at what to do when the market slows down is that business development mindset. I think that's something that both of us are familiar with. So in today's housing market, waiting for work to come to you can mean you miss opportunities. So component manufacturers staying active and finding new business, what should component manufacturers do to actively pursue new work instead of waiting for opportunities to come to them?
I'll preface all of my answers today that I probably don't have all of the answers or any of the answers, but it's one of those that really, hopefully, to create an intriguing dialogue and spark some thoughts and to really help component manufacturers find their own answers. And that's what it is, because it is such a local issue. But as
Right.
to get back to your question and to address that, I think it comes down to a hunter-gatherer approach and understanding your current market conditions. Now, I hear different things from different people all over the country, and they are saying different things, which hopefully that lends some optimism to people in some areas and maybe some pessimism to others on what they're experiencing. And it's definitely one of those that it's not the same everywhere, but understanding what you need and where's your business at? And do you need to be a little bit more hunter right now and into the near future, or is it still a gathering mode? Really making sure that every potential customer in your market understands your capabilities. And once you've done that and they're aware of what it is that you do, make sure that you're articulating the value. And is it you're doing something different, better, more efficient, or doing something that others simply can't do or won't do? And I think that's a big thing to communicate to customers. And then make sure you deliver on that and make sure that you understand that it's a life cycle, and every buying opportunity, every selling opportunity is a life cycle that hopefully turns into a flywheel that repeats itself over and over again.
Absolutely. So as we're looking at, like you said, a super diverse market share of different sections of the U.S., and our membership is very expansive over those different markets. So what strategies can component manufacturers use to bring in new customers effectively that maybe will help transcend those market trends?
Make sure that you understand what their needs are and not just shoving product, the same thing over and over and over and expecting them to just buy. And I think that's really getting back to that, articulating the value that you can deliver, whether or not you have or you always do, or it's something new for you. But then whatever you articulate, make sure you deliver on that, and know that builders, by nature, they're very resistant to change, and you're asking them to make a change, whether it's just changing a supplier or changing their process. And no matter how small or large that change is, it's going to be unfamiliar to them, and make sure that you help them through that change to where your solution ends up being a part of their everyday process and the new norm for them.
So how should component manufacturers evaluate which opportunities are worth pursuing, especially as you're in these diverse markets that may bring different opportunities, how do you take all of that information in and decide where to place your energy, since it is so important in down markets to make sure that you're applying your energy to the right spots?
Depends again on where you're at and what you need. It'd be a great problem to have. Oh my gosh, I got all these opportunities. I just got to pick the best one and what's going to happen, which that probably isn't the case, but you need to look at what's going to maximize return on investment. And it comes back to that very much a business term, and, balance the short-term needs with the long-term impacts of the business and create the relationships that are going to stand the test of time. In where is that your approach, or do you need just a series of short-term one-time wins? And there's different ways to do that, but it's really just recognizing what it is that you need right now and what do you need 6, 12, 18 months from now. And hopefully it goes into a long-term approach as well. But I've been there. It's one of those to where, gosh, where's that next job coming from? And there's different things that you do to do that versus where's that next cornerstone customer going to come from, and how do you win that business and move it over? But really understand where you're at and being realistic, and then selecting opportunities that are going to have the long-term impact versus sometimes you got to go out there and create your own opportunities too. And that's when you're beating the bush and going out and figuring those things out, and just really being realistic of where you're at and where you need to go and what you need to, is it a survive or is it, what do you need to be successful?
Yeah, exactly. I think also as we're looking at what that next customer needs, what should component manufacturers do to maybe diversify their product or service offerings to reach that next cornerstone customer, or maybe a new market that they haven't tapped into yet?
And that's, again, where do you want to take your customer? It's a journey. That do you only produce roof trusses? And if so, then, where are they always using roof trusses? Or is it maybe a 50-50 where they're using sticks some of the time, and sticks still happen? So hopefully they're able to convert that, but then take them on that journey to understand the value of a floor truss, and maybe beyond that, a floor cassette. And then, within that, a wall panel, and how do you add value and go from there. So that's where and they're going to know where they're at, and then talk with their customers and share that potential value and where can they help their business, and look to help their customers' business. And that's when you put yourself on the same side as the customer's wins, you're probably going to do a little bit better than if I'm just trying to look out for my own interests. Really just have that customer in mind when you're trying to take them on that journey.
I think too, as you're looking at maybe adding things to the customer journey, what new components, technologies, or services should component manufacturers be considering as they're looking to grow their business? Maybe you alluded to a couple before, but can you give us a little bit more detail about some things that you've been seeing from our other component manufacturers of how they're using this time to grow their business?
So I look at kind of the product journey as a continuum from 100% stick frame projects, probably the most rudimentary. You just get a pile of materials, you cut them up, and you build something out of it, compared to a full on, and it depends on how far you want to go on the other end of that continuum. Is it a modular or a 3D print? Something that obviously is not hit prime time, it's not ready for, that's where component manufacturers are in a nice spot. I think it's a very advantageous when you look at all of the ways that buildings can be built. Component manufacturer definitely is in the sweet spot to where they're adding value, they're advanced, but they're not so far that it's just unreasonable and never going to really work out. Take your customer on that journey as well. If they're only using one component, whether it's a roof truss or a floor truss, and some markets are great for floor trusses, but they still stick frame the roof. And it's one of those, is understanding that and try to articulate what is the value of using the next one, whether it's going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, meaning a roof truss, a floor truss, and wall panel being our 3 options. But once they're able to do that and take them, and it doesn't have to be all at once, but take them on a journey over time and to continue to articulate the value from going from that 2 to the 3, and that fully componentized project, really where you can align the product, the process, and the planning to do very extraordinary things. And we have an example of this every year at the IHS house in Washington, D.C., to where a lot of planning meets up with the right product and the right process to where it's a turnkey. And we're able to, this year it was a 3,000 square foot duplex, 2-story in 10 hours. Now that can be replicated. And is that what the builder needs? Is that what our component manufacturing customers needs? If so, gosh, what a better way to show them that. But I think that's where you take them on that journey. And if say you're there, then, there's other areas. What can be added to that wall panel? And that's one where I said it before, but I think our industry made a mistake way back when is we tried to replicate exactly what's being done in the field. When you look at what roof trusses, floor trusses do, they add value, they take wood fiber out of it, and they make a better product as a result through the use of the engineering, the triangulation. Wall panels, it's like even the software was like, man, let's just do exactly what's always been done and not even think about it. I think we can get some creative minds going and see where we can add value because there's a lot of steps. The walls are touched more than the roof and the floor really in the process when you look at the trades and everybody that comes in after the fact. And that's really the opportunity in my mind. And it's a long-term approach, but I think there's a lot of value that could be added to that wall panel. And looking at beyond that, maybe stair cassettes, pre-built stairs, other things that are probably further out there, but still possible and plausible would be a utility pod where you're just dropping in a pod that includes a lot of the utility room, or think of the HVAC, the plumber, some of those stuff are pre-done. So there's all kinds of things. You can get really wild and what else on that one end of the continuum, but you got to come back to basics and just understand that it's a journey and help them understand that it isn't going to happen overnight, but there's a lot of value and a lot of efficiency that can be added if they're willing to take those steps.
Yeah, I think as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, most people hear innovation, do something different. They hear disruption to my current operation. They hear I'm going to have to stop production to try to do something else, to pivot entirely in a new direction. So how do you see component manufacturers balance innovation with maintaining smooth operations so you're not having to put a jolt stop in your current production, but rather improve that flow to improve maybe the process or the offerings at the end of the line?
And that, when you look at the production side of things, that's why those incremental innovations are so important, because the little things, and I'll steal your term, and I still absolutely love it, the seconds and cents that you're looking to improve on. That's a big way on the production side. But you think of that innovation and what does the customer need? And when you're crafting your business and putting it around what your customers' needs are, the builders. We had a recent conversation with a builder, and conversation went to, you can build it faster, cheaper, better, pick two. And I'd even argue maybe go back and pick one. And what are the builders being asked to do? Are they asking to build higher quality homes? Is it like we need better homes? I'm not seeing many headlines out there in the mainstream media of talking about, the homes they need to be better. But what they do need to be is more affordable. And that isn't necessarily just, you got to drop your price to drop the overall price. But think about how you as a component manufacturer or a component manufacturing industry can help builders be more efficient and build more affordable. And I think there's an opportunity in there to look at your processes, add the innovation, do the little things. Where's the value add? Not just to where it drops your price that you're offering that builder, but also how do you, to essentially lower that cost, but how do you improve their process to where they're able to offer a more affordable product to their customer? And that could be a bigger win for the component manufacturer if done right. And if they look at it that way, because the faster will probably lend itself to cheaper in the long run, especially for the builder, if they're able to drop those cycle times. We've articulated that a lot through Framing the American Dream. We build more affordable houses, and it doesn't have to be a huge delta, but it has to be something that's better. And then by and large, the quality is going to be there just by the standard operating procedures that component manufacturers have. We've got all kinds of things in place from SBCA, and TPI1 is a great example of what we have to do and what we're mandated to do to improve quality or to have quality in their product. Obviously, you can always go above and beyond there, and I suggest people do, but really look at what are your builders' needs and what are their constraints, and how can you be integral to them being able to deliver on that.
Yeah. So, in that same vein, what should component manufacturers be doing to promote their components effectively to builders or framers in the field?
I guess ask yourself the question of, do your customers know exactly what you do or can do, and articulate your capabilities? And that's one of those things. And I've been there. You get in the rut. Like, man, we're really good at putting the metal in the wood and putting it through that press and rolling it out to the job site. And we just do that over and over and over and over again. There's other things that can be done. Whether a great example is that pre-cut framing package that a lot of people are doing. And when I was a component manufacturer, I did it because we had a lot of egg-related DIY because there was nobody else. I live in such a sparsely populated area, which a lot of problems with that, but I love it. But back to making sure you can articulate the capabilities. And I think there's a lot of saws out there that have the capability of doing that pre-cut framing package. They obviously have access to the software. Now, it might be a little function or differences of that. And it might come with some additional costs or whatnot, but that's a great example of what are your capabilities? Do your customers know that? And once they understand that, and you can encourage them to be creative and that you want to work together, you want to collaborate on what the solutions are that they need, that's probably going to win you some business. And that's where, if you are there to help them win, you're going to be on the same team, and hopefully you should win as a result. But beyond that, when you do have a win, celebrate it. Make sure they know. Make sure your staff knows. Make sure that everybody in town knows that this is a great job. And that kind of comes from promotion, and a lot of different ways to do that, whether it's through newsletters or emails or social media or just taking out advertising, whatever it is. But make sure you celebrate your wins, and then service those relationships or go out and create those relationships. That's the best way to do that, is make sure that you are there to understand the problems and seeing if and where you can help solve those problems. And component manufacturers, by far, I really should look at every step of the construction process, but I think the CMs do one of the best jobs of adding value, and anybody in the construction process in the supply chain. And they need to discover what value needs to be added for each specific customer. And if they can do that on a customer basis, or these pockets or groups, depending on how large, we've got some very large manufacturers out there. But if they can segment their customers to understand what values need to be added and they can deliver on that, that's really the opportunity to ingrain themselves into their customers' businesses.
So, how should component manufacturers educate builders on what they offer to be able to strengthen those relationships?
I think it's in all of the above. Communications is such a difficult task in this day and age, between the cell phones and the emails, and if you get a few minutes to watch some television, and you're just constantly bombarded with people trying to get you to do something you probably don't want to do. And a lot of that comes down to personal relationships. If you're able to be that solutions expert in your market, and really that's what I wanted to do, is like, how am I going to be the best person in town that knows about bracing and restraining trusses? It came down to BCSI. And then how can I be the best person in my region and state and so on and so forth? And there's ways to become that expert, but it's really going to come down to personal relationships, but help them also connect with their peers. It's probably a little harder in local construction markets. They might not like each other, but there'll be people that do, and that they'll get along, and they can ask questions and say, what are you having some issues with? And, ultimately, I think working with organizations like SBCA and market development efforts, like, one of our main things that we want to do is have more trusses by others specified. We want more people to use more components, and we're taking different efforts. And we've had some projects where we struggle to get component manufacturers on board with it. I think it's out of their norm. They're so used to just putting the plates in the wood that they don't look up to see that right now, or whenever it was, they had some good times and they think it's going to last. Things changed. So hopefully they can work with SBCA or other organizations, maybe some of their suppliers, to help with those market development, because that's one where everybody wins if we can grow that pie. And growing the pie might not just be more houses. It might be more the product share from now. Instead of having the roof system, you've got the floor system, you've got the wall system, you've got all three. And then really you're building a moat around that once you've successfully done that. So a lot of things there to think about, but it is one of those that, coming back to it, it's all about do everything you can, especially when times are good, and when times aren't so good. It's important to remain focused on it, because the constant is change. And while it might be good now or it might be bad now, know that it's not going to last.
Yeah, I think one thing that we really emphasize at SBCA is that no company operates in a vacuum. So how do you encourage component manufacturers to connect with peers to see what's working for others as they're looking for ideas or strategies to improve their business?
Engage them and meet them where they're at. If it's the local HBAs are a great opportunity, local events, whatever. There's different things. People like to get out, and that's one of the things. We're probably 5 years, 4 years, I don't know how many years post-COVID, but people still really like engaging with one another in person. I think that's a great opportunity. And then when you do have that opportunity, make sure that you've got something to say or some updates, and it could just be changes in local practices, regional construction techniques, national maybe. Codes are a great way to be updated and say, hey, are you aware of this is coming down the pike? And, being ahead of that and solving problems before they ever occur is a great one. But just being able to articulate those opportunities, even things like we have a new BCSI. Are you aware of some of the changes here on the compression web bracing? Make sure they know, the builders know before their code inspector knows, and they're out there saying, hey, why is it like this and not this is specified by XYZ. So I think becoming that expert and being a good person that they want to be around and asking them questions, get them talking about their business. But really, it's meeting them where they're at, and trying to figure out where that is can be difficult, but you definitely want to be engaging as best you can.
Yeah. So, what kind of things does SBCA offer in terms of being able to help facilitate those connection points for those long-term relationships with other component manufacturers?
So CM to CM, that's one of the big things we really hang our hat on, is trying to create those networking opportunities and those connections. BCMC, for a few years, the unofficial tagline was building community, making connections. And BCMC is a great opportunity to do that, to come together with 1,000 of the best component manufacturers from across the country. Is a great opportunity. And I say the best because if they're working on their business, they want to get better. And I know that there's a few folks out there, probably more than I wish that there were, but I know there's some know-it-alls out there that don't need to change, and they're probably not even listening to this podcast. But it is one of those that, engaging others through SBCA is a great opportunity. Your suppliers probably have opportunities as well, but the open quarterly meetings, we've got one coming up in December in California. So huge plug for that. Registration's still there, so get out. And it is in California, so our West Coast folks can engage us there. The chapters are another good opportunity for locally. I know it's not always fun to go rub elbows with the guy that beat you out of the job by 1.5% or something, or whatever it might be on this last job, but just anecdotally talking that there are opportunities to meet people, chapters, committees, whether it's in-person committee meetings at an OQM, but we have a ton of committees that meet online, and you can strike up a relationship from somebody across the country is a great opportunity to do that. So really engaging SBCA. And then I looked at thinking back to my experiences, and we used to have something called business solution groups, and maybe it's time to revisit those. But that's how I met like Mike Vitti. It's how I met Dave Mitchell and a couple others, Craig Anderson out of Minnesota, and Gary Weaver, who's since retired, but great people, great truss manufacturers. I learned a ton from, and it wasn't even just about truss manufacturing, but when to speak up and maybe when not to, but definitely a catalyst for just engaging with SBCA and continuing that learning curve.
Yeah. So as we're looking at, as component manufacturers look for having those conversations with other component manufacturers, what should they be focusing on for topics of discussion? How do you balance learning while also staying true to your own strengths, but also combining in some of that long-term networking?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to do is establish rapport, understand who's similar. And there's personalities, and some blend well together and some might not. And I remember people that I used to be the most frustrated with in association work in life are now some of my closest friends. And that's just one of those things. Give people a chance, and give them more than one chance. That's probably some good advice on that, but definitely don't come across as a know-it-all. And again, this is a one-on-one podcast, and I don't claim to know hardly any of this, but I'm just trying to give some food for thought to get people to think about it for themselves. So take all of it with a grain of salt, but basically think about it and do your own thing. But when you're at the meetings or when you have those opportunities, create a relationship, ask them, say, hey, what's going on here? And maybe give them some softballs, get them talking. People in general really enjoy talking about themselves. I've noticed over the years, if you ask them questions, and that's a great way to have them open up. And once you have that rapport, ask some questions and know what's inbounds and what's out of bounds. I've been there in some awkward questions, like people were asking very specific, probably sensitive or trade secret esque type questions, and people will dodge it and they'll write that person off. But at the same time, people in this industry, because we are so fragmented, they are very open once you establish that relationship, and they'll talk about their problems and they'll help you with yours. And they might not have answers, but it helps to just get it out there and get people thinking about it. And that's the same thing with your successes. You have to be willing to share what's worked for you too, to when somebody else has a problem. And it's a two-way street. And if you're willing to travel up and down it, you can have some really amazing relationships and friendships that, that your business friends that kind of get into it to where, I remember I joked when I was a CM, I saw the people at SBCA meetings a heck of a lot more than I saw my friends that lived in the same town. I got old doing this and I don't go out and see them ever. So you travel to different parts and you see the people 3-4 times a year, maybe not that much, maybe a little more depending on some things, but it's a great way to network and help your business. And you don't understand when you're on that island how valuable having those lifelines are until you absolutely need them, and then you use them.
Absolutely. So as we're looking to planning for the future in an ever evolving housing market, what should component manufacturers be prioritizing in their business development over the next 12 months or so?
They're going to know better than I will, but I'll encourage, no matter what, if things are great or things are bad, take action, be active, always looking to improve in everything you do. And like, how do you get a little bit better? And don't ever just rest and be like, oh gosh, we have it so great. That's usually when you get knocked off. So it's one of those to, incremental improvements and celebrate your wins, like I said earlier, but know it's the benefits are probably going to go to the person that's more active and that they're trying and that they've got that effort and they've got an attitude that is good for them to take that, remain humble. And then when things are down, be active as well and know that you can get back and things will come around. And if you're aggressive about it, it'll probably hit you a little earlier than somebody else that might not be doing as much.
So what emerging trends should component manufacturers be looking out for to create new opportunities? I know we hit a little bit on this before, but as we're looking in these next couple of months planning for 2026, are there any trends that you're looking for in the industry to help diversify the market?
I think continue to have conversations on knowing what the customers want and need. And nationally, I think it comes back to that affordability, faster, better, cheaper, pick one, pick two. Look at ways to where even if your price take, your whatever it might be, your expense, it goes up, that if it helps deliver on a more affordable product, your builder partners, your framer partners are probably going to be interested in hearing about it. So make sure that you're always looking at how can you add value, either through the process of getting it from your shop to in their building, or just in the project itself with having some holes drilled, or maybe you're adding a layer of insulation or whatever it might be on the wall panels or whatever it could possibly be, to understand where the builders are at and their perspective and know that their jobs are not easy. Like our scope of work for component manufacturers, while complicated, is fairly straightforward when you consider that they have to take a bare piece of dirt and deliver it to needy homeowners. That's a lot that they do. So whatever we can do as component manufacturers in our industry to make their jobs easier, more efficient, and more affordable, I think they're going to want to hear about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially as we're looking for what our component manufacturers can do to build resiliency. So what would you look at to proactively grow business and build resiliency in this stage of the year, as we're looking towards next year, as we're looking to this ever shifting market? What would you recommend, or what would you in your shoes be doing to build resiliency and grow a business?
I think understanding that the only constant is change. And I talked to a number of CMs earlier in the year, and I'm curious if it's still the same way, but they felt like this year was very much like last year, and they were almost uneasy. It was almost like they had a itch that needed to be scratched because it wasn't up, it wasn't down, it wasn't. You think of the last 5 years, 8 years, everything. Go back to that 2018 timeframe with lumber and everything that's happened since then. Our industry, it's been through a lot. Now, if you go back that 20 years, 25 years, it's been through a lot more. But it's one of those is really understand that the constant is change. And while it might feel uneasy that we're not having immediate change right now, understand that the market will change one way or another. And how do you put yourself in a position to capitalize on that? And being comfortable with change will help you with that resiliency. And know that having your bag of tricks, do you need to change your product lines? Do you need to change your product mix? Maybe from single to multi, or multi, add in some ag or add in some commercial, those types of things. Was it more of a geographic approach? Do you expand? Do you focus? That sort of things. And how do you communicate the value? And that's probably a constant need, is to communicate the value and remind people, even if they know, remind them again and tell them however many times it needs to be. Make sure that they understand that not only the value they currently offer, but also the opportunity for potential value, things that you can do, willing to do to change your business to meet their needs. And if you're going to do that, you're probably going to find yourself with a lot of good partners, and that should hopefully ultimately lead to success.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being our co-host for this episode, Jess.
Yeah, thanks. You hit some hard questions there. That's not an easy step to talk about. And everybody wishes it was all good times every time, but hopefully it struck a chord with a few people and gave them some ideas, or got them thinking about what it is that they need. And hopefully that leads to some success. And again, throw it all out the window if you want, but if there's hopefully a couple nuggets in there, hopefully it was worth the time.
Absolutely. I think that it is a good conversation to be having, especially for any of our component manufacturers that are looking for that growth mindset, that continuous improvement, all of those fun manufacturing buzzwords as we get into 2026 planning. Thank you all for joining us. And if you enjoyed the content of this podcast, you can like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And we will see you next time on Component Connection.
Thanks, Abby.
Thanks for listening to Component Connection, brought to you by SBCA. If there's a topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, email us at podcast@sbcacomponents.com.